Good morning, church. Would you please stand up? Let's worship together.
Okay, welcome. If you're here in person, we're so glad to have you. If you're joining online, either live or watching a recording, so glad you're here. If you are here in person, we have communion packets in the back. There are gluten-free options as well. Last week, if you were here, we talked about an opportunity for us to serve as a church. We're going to be doing a project with Block Ministries. That event's coming up on August 27th. You can work the morning shift or an afternoon shift. They're 3-hour shifts that you can sign up. We'll have lunch in between. It's a great opportunity to serve as a family, to put in some service hours, and it's a great way to just meet other people around church. You know, if you come in, just come in before service and leave right away, and you feel like you want to make some more connections here. It's a great way to do that. So encourage that. That's, again, on August 27th. You can sign up on the next tab from our website. And finally here, we're going to watch, before Nathan comes out, we're going to watch a short video about small groups. So small groups are going to start back up after Labor Day. There's all kinds of options for you. So if you want to join a men's group, a women's group, a couples group, if you've only got availability on certain days of the week, lots of options. So let's watch a video here and learn more about that.
Hey Bridgetown, I'm Chanel Stevens, and I've been around BCC since 2020, right before COVID said hello. So I figured it was time to let my light shine. Small groups have been so good for my walk, and in so many ways, God has shown me just how much He loves me amongst other kingdom builders. I love prayer. I'm not the expert by any means, but I know it's powerful. So because my heart is so big for the relationship that prayer invites, I decided to host a small group. My group will meet on Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m. in my home in Westwood. My group will be focused on prayer, exploring it from the basic concept, practicing prayer together, individually and as a kingdom. We will have materials and you will have fun. You know, the kind of fun that stretches you, empowers you, and motivates you to walk in God's light all over this land. This group is open to women of all ages. This will be an intentionally intimate group. If you need to bring your kiddos, I can work to accommodate that. I'm all about no barriers and inviting everyone in to receive what they need to keep living out their purpose in life. Let's grow, let's connect, let's pray. See you in September.
Hello there, my name is Nathan Hardesty.
And I am Nikki. We will be leading a small group on Sunday nights from 5:30 to 7. We've intentionally chosen this time because it's when our teenagers are in the youth group. So our group is only for families with youth who attend BCSM at night.
We want to give your family an opportunity to connect with a community of believers while your youth are doing the exact same thing. We don't provide childcare, but we do meet in Bridgetown Kids, and so children are always welcome to come and they can play in the room next door. The adults meet in one room and the youth are upstairs. Our group will be going along with the sermon series.
We are excited to walk with you and become more like Jesus.
Hi, I'm Kevin Penn.
And I'm Karen Penn.
Our small group will meet on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. in our home, located in the Bridgetown area.
Our group will be going along with the sermon series.
Our group is open to any and all adults.
We do not have space for children at this time, but we are excited to have you in our home and get to know you.
Please join us.
Hello, Bridgetown Church. I'm Nick Parker, your friendly neighborhood children's minister, and I'm going to be leading a group for families with elementary age and older kids on Wednesday nights from 6:30 to 8. We're going to meet here at the church, and we'll meet in Bridgetown Kids. And so to help you decide if this is a group that will be a good fit for you or if you're a family, I kind of want to let you know what to expect. So during our time together, we'll have a 20 to 25 minute interactive lesson that's going to cover a chapter from this book. It's Big Truths for Young Hearts. And during the lesson, we'll also be reading the Bible, we'll be answering questions, completing some activity sheets, stuff like that. And so the goal is really to have families thinking deeply and growing in their knowledge and their understanding and, most importantly, their love for God and their love for others, and to do that together. So in addition to the lesson, we're going to play games and sing and pray. It's definitely going to be a fun group, but it's not a play group. It's a family worship small group. And so that means that everyone who joins, both kids and adults, will be expected to participate fully and to do that without detracting or distracting from that overall purpose and goal of the group. And so if this sounds like a group that you might be interested in, I hope you will consider joining.
We're Andrea and Ken Miller. We've been attending BCC for about 3 years. We are excited to facilitate a small group this fall. We'll be meeting on Tuesdays from 6:30 to 8 in our home in Delhi. We will be following the sermon series.
Our group is open to anyone. We have space in the basement for children to come play.
We have a friendly dog, and at times we might have toys on the couch cushions, but we're excited to have you join us as we grow in our relationship with each other and with God. If you're considering a small group, we'd love to have you join us.
Hi, I'm AJ.
And I'm Bridget.
Our group will meet on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. We will meet here at the church down in the fellowship hall.
Our group will be going over the sermon series, and all ages are welcome. Your children will be welcome to play in Bridgetown Kids while we are having our study.
We look forward to some great conversations and hope you will join us.
Hello, my name is Nathan Hardesty, and I will once again be leading the men's ministry small group. We will meet on Wednesday nights from 7:30 to 9. You can choose to join us in person in the fellowship hall of the church, or you may want to join us online. This year, we will use the Explore the Bible series, which will help us to really dig into the Word of God. This group is open for all guys ages 12 and up. It's the perfect group for men who are away at college, or for guys who travel a lot for work, or maybe you live in a different state and you want to be a part of a small group. Gentlemen, I would love to have you join me and other great guys in the church to explore the Bible and to grow together in our relationship with Jesus.
Hi, I'm Valerie, and I'll be hosting a group on Monday nights at 6:30 in my home in Green Township. All are welcome, including kids, so hopefully yours can keep mine occupied. I look forward to getting to know you.
Hi, I'm Tess, and this is Jen. We will be leading a women's small group that will meet on Thursdays at 7 p.m.
We'll meet here at the church. Our group will be going along with the sermon series.
Please speak to one of us if childcare is needed, and we are so excited to have you in group.
Can we give a hand to all of our small group leaders here at the church? I'm super excited for those groups. It's really cool just to see all the variety in the groups. And I'm sitting there thinking, I want to be in that one. I want to be in that one. I don't know if I want to be in the one I'm leading. I'm just kidding. I want to be in that one too. And so I'm super excited to be a part of those groups and to connect with you all. And if you are one of those leaders, thank you. We have a discipleship pathway here at the church, which is an intentional model to help you become like Jesus, and leading a group is one of the steps on that pathway. It's stepping up and saying, hey, I'm willing to put myself out there and to lead other people to becoming like Jesus. And I'm just really thrilled to hear stories of how that happens in our small groups. Discipleship always starts with a step. Discipleship always starts with a step. Discipleship's a big word, but all discipleship means is following Jesus. And from the very beginning, when Jesus started his earthly ministry, he came onto the earth and he called people and he said, follow me. And so fishermen and tax collectors and various people, they took a step. It was a step to follow Jesus. Discipleship always starts with a step. When I think about taking steps, I can't help but to think about Neil Armstrong. Neil Armstrong's the American astronaut who is the first person to walk on the moon. On July 21st, 1969, he stepped out of Apollo 11 and onto the lunar surface. And after his first step, he famously said, that's one small step for man, say the rest with me, and one giant leap for mankind, right? That statement is forever remembered, and it embodies one of the most iconic steps ever taken in history. I have to wonder how and in what ways that step defined Neil Armstrong's life. How many people asked him later on, hey, what did the surface of the moon feel like? To what degree did his life forever change in a pivotal way because of that step? My guess would be a lot. Some of you have been to UC before, at least up until recently. I don't know if it's still there or not, but when you would walk through the hallways of UC, they had an office that was Neil Armstrong's office, and it was like a commemorated place just to remember him, and it all goes back to that one step that he made. My wife and I this summer in our travels drove through his hometown, and there's all kinds of stuff. I won't say it right. It's like Wapakoneta or something like that. There you go. You guys said it better than me. And that one step has literally affected that entire little, otherwise sleepy small town up in the cornfields of Ohio. I want to ask you to think to various degrees about the pivotal steps you've taken in life. Some of you have stepped onto a college campus, begin a program, or maybe to go back and get your master's degree, and that step has forever changed what you're doing right now in life. For others of you, you took a step across a room or a coffee shop to introduce yourself to a pretty young girl or to a man, and that has changed your life, and maybe you're married to that person now. Perhaps you took a step to start or to keep the family business, and when you sat down in the room and you finally signed on the dotted line, that step forever changed the trajectory of your life. For many of you, you've taken the step to be baptized. It's something we do as Christians, and it really is a symbol of what God does in our lives. We step into the water, and we stand in kind of a helpless position, and we're placed underwater, and we're raised again to live a new life for Jesus. And it's a powerful step in the life of people who are following Jesus. For others, you've taken a step towards adoption or fostering or having children, and your family looks different today because of that step. Here's the question. I'm going to pause for a moment and ask you to really think about it. What have been your life's pivotal steps? As you look back, what would you say, man, when I took that step to do that thing, to go to that place, to have that conversation, like that changed my life? What have been your life's pivotal steps? Sometimes those steps are big, and sometimes they're small. Sometimes they're one step that leads to another step that leads to another step. I'm personally learning this in connection to running. Last fall, my wife and I started the Couch to 5K program, and we made it to week 4 before I stepped out of my van and tore the meniscus in my knee. That was a pivotal step for me. I just didn't pivot the right way, apparently. And so after knee surgery, I kind of assumed that my running days were over, but on June 27th of this year, we said, hey, let's do it again. Let's see what happens. So we started the Couch to 5K program again, and this week, tomorrow, marks week 8. And so the previous 3 days of this past week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we ran 2.5 miles each of those days, and we're running right around a 10-minute mile, 10-minute and 20-second mile. And I know for some of you guys, you're like, that's lame. I could run that in my sleep. But for me, a 10-minute mile is like, ooh, I can hear that. I can hear like the angels as I'm running. It's crazy. But it's really neat. I keep telling my wife, though, those of you who know my wife, Nikki, she is a very beautiful woman. And when we get to the end of the 2.5 miles, she's usually ahead of me and I'm behind her. I keep telling her, they're going to call the cops on us. Because somebody would be like, there's this old man chasing this young woman around the neighborhood. Like, I'm just waiting on the cops show up. But it hasn't happened yet. But all of that, those steps, and so next Saturday, we will run a 5K. I will run 3.1 miles, which is literally the most I've ever ran in my entire life. And it started with a step. It started with one step that led to another step, that led to another step, that just kind of kept building upon themselves. And I'm actually, in some weird, sick way, looking forward to running that and seeing how it goes. And so steps, when strung together, make a big difference. And I want to concentrate on a step today. It's probably the most iconic step that the Apostle Peter ever took in following Jesus. If you've been around the church for a while and you've heard the stories of the Bible, you may be starting to think, I bet I know which step it is. See if you can guess as we go forward. And so Jesus, he starts his ministry on this earth around the Sea of Galilee. I think I have a picture of the Sea of Galilee for you. It's a very well-known sea for Jesus' disciples. In fact, a lot of them are fishermen. They have spent the majority of their life on that sea. They know where the good fishing spots are. They understand the tide patterns. They know when the storm is a few miles off and where to go for shelter. They're very comfortable with the sea. But what I think they were not very comfortable with was discipleship. They're new at following Jesus. And so every step they take to become like Jesus is a new step. It's a challenging step to them. And yet they heard the call, follow me, and they said, okay, and they started taking steps towards Jesus. When we pick up the story we're going to read today, it's at a particularly difficult time for the disciples. First, we read at the very beginning of the chapter that the king of the area, King Herod was his name, he had killed John the Baptist. And so he had him beheaded, and literally his head was placed on a silver platter. And so John is the first cousin of Jesus. They are connected, and they're in the same line of business. They both are preachers. And so there's all this emotional uncertainty that's swirling around the disciples. And Jesus says to them, hey, let's take a step and go off to a quiet place to pray. And so Jesus tries to go off and reconnect with God. He's emotionally spent. He's been healing people. He's been traveling. The disciples are tired. They hear about this awful, tragic event, and they go away to get some time. But it doesn't work out that way because a crowd of 5,000 people come. And Jesus, the text tells us, has compassion on these people, and he starts to heal these people. And so he spends the entire day out in the Galilean sun healing people, and the disciples are there, and they are exhausted. And at the very end of the day, when they are absolutely wiped out, Jesus says, hey, let's feed the crowd. And they say, well, how are we going to do that? We don't have any food. And so he asks around, and he finds some fish and some loaves, and he breaks them, and he serves them. But I want you to catch in the story that he uses the disciples to serve them. Now, I've waited tables through college. I never waited on a group of 5,000 people. And it was 5,000 men plus women and children. So estimates around 9,000. 9,000 people, 12 servers. That doesn't seem like a great Saturday night, right? And yet that's exactly what they're called on to do. And so these disciples, they serve. And at the end, Jesus says, and I can just picture, it doesn't tell us in the text, but I have to speculate the eye rolls a little bit, because Jesus says, hey, pick up the leftover pieces. And so these poor disciples who are absolutely worn out, they go out into the crowd and they collect all the leftover pieces of bread and all the leftover pieces of fish, and they gather them up, and they have 12 baskets that are overflowing with the leftovers. The imagery there, of course, is that Jesus is enough for all of Israel and more. That he will satisfy their greatest needs. That he will not only meet their physical needs, but more than that, and there will be left over to go around for everyone else. And so after all this happens, we get to this point in the story. The disciples are spent, though. They're emotionally tired. They are physically tired. They are absolutely spent. And here's what happens. I'm going to put the words on the screen for you, and I want to ask you, read the underlined parts with me. This is what we read. Immediately, he being Jesus, made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. And when evening came, he was there alone. But the boat by this time was a long ways from the land. Read this next part. Beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the fourth watch of the night, he did what? He came to them, walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, and they said, it's a ghost. And they cried out in fear. But immediately, you'll see that word 3 times, Jesus spoke to them, saying, what did he say? Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid. And Peter answered him, Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water. And he, Jesus, said, come. So read this. So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water. And he came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he said, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus reached out his hand and took hold of him and said, oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt? And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat, the disciples, they worshiped him, saying, what did they say? Truly, you are the Son of God. It's a pivotal step in the life of Peter. It's a pivotal step in the story of what Jesus is doing. It's one of the most memorable steps of all time. Peter becomes one of only two people who actually walks on water. I want to spend our remaining time together focusing on this step because I think it has something really important to say to every single one of us today who is taking steps to become like Jesus. First, I want you to see that the step occurred in the storm. The step occurred in the storm. Would you do this with me? Whether you're joining online or here in the room, I want to reread that sentence. The step occurred in the storm. And when I say the word step, would you just raise your leg and put it back down like you're taking a step? Ready? Let's read it together. The step occurred in the storm. Good. We're going to do that throughout this just to kind of drive this home. I want you to remember the context. John the Baptist has just been beheaded. The disciples have just spent hours collecting leftovers. They are emotionally tired. They are physically tired. They are, quote, a long way from the land. When John tells this story, he gives us a detail that they are 2.8 miles from the shore. Knowing what we know about the Sea of Galilee, they're right smack dab in the middle. They're right in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, and it's the fourth watch of the night. That means it's between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. Between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. And it is, according to verse 25, at this time that Jesus came to them. It's in the storm that Jesus comes to them and asks them to make and take a step of faith. You know, it's not the first time when we read through the book of Matthew that Jesus and his followers find themselves in the middle of a storm. In fact, just a few chapters earlier, they are in the middle of a storm on the exact same sea, probably in the exact same boat, but this time Jesus is in the boat. This time he's in the boat and he's laying in the boat asleep, and they wake him up and say, "Don't you care if we drowned?" And Jesus showed his care by calming the storm, but this was different because it's 3 a.m. and they're looking around the boat, and they don't see Jesus. And could it be that you feel that way too? See, oftentimes we feel caught in the middle of a storm, and we sense that we are starting to sink. We feel like we've been at it for a very long time. It feels like it's 3 o'clock in the morning. We are emotionally tired. We are physically spent. We have just this sense that God has abandoned us. But I want you to notice that Jesus never lost sight of the people he loved. Jesus came to them in the storm. God has a history of meeting people in the storm of life. God does not lose sight of the people he loves. Jeremiah, an Old Testament prophet, spoke to the people of God at the worst possible time in the national history of Israel. And when he spoke to them, he famously said, in the midst of the greatest national storm they had ever experienced, God has plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. Words spoken in a storm. What does Jesus say when he shows up? He says, "Take heart, do not be afraid." Jesus was never removed from his followers. He knew exactly where they were at, and he invited Peter to take a step. I just want to be fully transparent with you. Some of you know me really well. We've been friends and walked life together for well over a decade now. For others of you, this may be your first Sunday and you've never met me before, but I want to tell you the last couple of years were really tough for my family and I. We lost one dad and 3 grandpas in an 18-month period of time. I was stretched way too thin. I was living life at a pace that was absolutely not sustainable. And I took a step to talk to the elders of the church and just to say to them, I'm not okay. I may look okay on the outside, but on the inside, I just feel empty. I don't feel like there's anything left. I don't feel joy anymore in life. I'm just distanced from people, and I'm really lost and hollow. And graciously, the elders agreed to give me a 2-week sabbatical at the beginning of July to pray and rest, and a 2-week vacation at the end of July to spend time reconnecting with my family. And I'm learning that I don't have to have it all together. I'm learning that it is by grace I am saved. I'm learning to admit that I'm not okay at times, and that all of us get beaten by the storms of life. But my step towards sustainable rhythms occurred in the storm of life. And to be honest with you, I wish it didn't work that way. I wish the sea was always calm. I wish there were not 3 a.m. moments. I wish that life wasn't physically and emotionally draining to the point that at times you feel absolutely empty. But what I know is that it's in the midst of the storm that we are called to take the steps of faith. The step occurred in the storm. And secondly, the step led to a miracle. I want to say that again. The step led to a miracle. I'm going to have you read that with me. And if you would, just raise your leg and put it back down when you say the word step. Are you ready? The step led to a miracle. The step led to a miracle. Let me help you put yourself into the boat. Have you ever been stuck in traffic and there's somebody walking and they were walking faster than you? Have you ever experienced that? It's like the most frustrating thing in the world. You're in your car that'll go 120 miles an hour, at least that's what the thing on the dash says, and you're sitting in traffic and there's some dude just sauntering by and he's going faster than you. It's a maddening feeling. That's the feeling I think the disciples got. Remember, most of them are fishermen. They've spent their life on this sea. They know the sea. They know how to use the boat. They are well aware of exactly everything and how it works. The journey should have taken 1 to 2 hours, but they had been rowing for 6 to 12 hours because of the wind and the weather. And then Jesus comes up and he's just walking by right in the middle of it. And all those feelings of like, how is this right, had to come to them. Can you imagine the frustration they felt? They knew the lake. They had the history. And maybe that's the point. See, it's when the disciples realized that they couldn't do it on their own that suddenly there was Jesus. Then and only then did Peter take the step out of the boat and onto the water, and then and only then did he experience the miracle. 2 people in the history of the world have walked on water, and one of them was Peter. Considering this, children's author Arthur Joel Ryan says this: sometimes the greatest miracles of life happen when we too are willing to step out in faith and surrender to God's power instead of relying on our own. I think that bears repeating. Sometimes the greatest miracles of life happen when we too are willing to step out in faith and surrender to God's power instead of relying on our own. That was true for Peter, and it could be true for us as well. That when we admit, man, I can't do this, that's when God is able to show up and actually do something significant. I've experienced this so many times as a leader in this church that it's hard to even pinpoint one to talk about, but one that's fresh in my mind is back in February when the leadership team went away and we started to pray and ask God, what do you want us to do with the mission for this coming year, the school calendar year? So what started last Sunday, August of this year through July 31st of next year, and we felt this overwhelming sense that God was asking us to invest significantly in our community. And so we looked at our account and we had over $100,000 in it that we had carefully saved throughout COVID. And we decided, you know what, we're going to invest all of that into 10 local missions, and we're going to invest 2,500 service hours. And we made that decision, and we came back to you, to the church family, and we said, hey, this is what we're thinking. And we laid that out on a Sunday, and that following week, we received a call from the insurance company that we had been in negotiations with for over 16 months saying, hey, we're going to put a new roof on the building, and it's completely paid for, $130,000 roof. I think that's more than a coincidence. See, my experience is, and I would maybe even call that a miracle, that when we take a step of faith, that it's in those steps of faith that God shows up and starts to do something and work in a certain direction. I certainly don't want to single his family out and make him feel bad, but Jeff is here with us today, and his wife Jamie is back in the hospital. Hi, Jamie, if you're with us online. For over 75 days now, has been in the hospital, and a couple of Saturdays ago, Jeff called myself and Margaret and Darnell and said, hey, would you guys come down to the hospital and just pray with us? And so we went down there on a Saturday morning, and we stood with Jamie, and we prayed. And from that time, when he made that call on a Friday to say, hey, would you pray with and for Jamie until now, she's consistently gotten better. She's not out of the woods yet. But we're seeing God work, and we're seeing God move, and we are relying on faith and saying we want to see a miracle happen in the midst of the storm. That's what it's like to follow Jesus. See, Peter's step occurred in the storm. Peter's step led to a miracle. And thirdly, the step shifted focus to Jesus. The step shifted focus to Jesus. Would you say that with me? And as we say the word step, would you just take a step? Ready? The step shifted focus to Jesus. We see the focus of the disciples, and specifically of Peter, moving several times in this passage. First, the disciples were listening to Jesus. He said, get in the boat. And they went and they got in the boat, and they went to the other side. But then they put their attention on the oars and on the storm and on the circumstance, and that's what they were focused on. And then Jesus comes walking by, and they shift their focus back to Jesus. And Peter says, hey, can I walk on the water? And Jesus says, sure, come on out. And Peter steps out of the boat onto the water. But then his focus changes back to the storm, and he's looking at the waves, and he's looking at the wind, and he starts to sink again. And in that moment, he has a crucial decision to make. Is he going to keep focusing on the storm, or is he going to refocus on Jesus? And he does. He refocuses on Jesus, and the text says immediately when he calls out, Jesus reaches out and lifts him up. The wind became a powerful distraction. The winds and waves led to fear. And I've experienced this so many times, too many times to count. I decide I'm going to take a step to following Jesus. And I take that step, and then instantly I start to look at the circumstances and to focus on fear. I start to get scared about what's happening, and my focus moves away from Jesus. I promise you, if you sign up to be in a small group, you're going to love it, but you're also going to have moments where you're like, I don't know if I really want to go tonight. I don't know if I want to open up tonight. There's going to be moments when you're focused on your circumstance and you start to kind of shift and forget why you took the step in the first place. Right after church next Sunday, Ken Blaybaum is going to host the last of our informational meetings about the upcoming mission trip to Arizona, Red Sands, next summer, June of 2023. I know some of you have come to the previous two information meetings. There's one after church next Sunday. And I know this because I've experienced it. Every time I make a decision to go on a mission trip, I sign up and I say, I'm going to do this, or me and my family, we're going to do this together. And then I am filled with fear and I'm filled with doubt, and I start looking at the circumstances and saying, how are we going to pay for it? How are we going to make the timing work? How's this going to happen? And my focus shifts, and I have to remind myself to refocus on what it is that Jesus is doing. See, I think metaphorically it is on the water that Christians work out their faith. Metaphorically, it's on the water that Christians work out their faith. As we take steps to follow Jesus, we are always faced with the decision, will we focus on the wind and the waves? Will we look at the circumstances, or will we turn our attention once again to Jesus? Peter's step occurred in the storm. Peter's step led to a miracle. Peter's step shifted the focus to Jesus. And finally, the step resulted in worship. The step resulted in worship. Would you say that with me and take a step when you say the word step? Ready? The step resulted in worship. Good. The step resulted in worship. Remember, when Jesus and Peter get in the boat, it's in that moment that they say, truly, you are the Son of God. What you may not know is if you start at the beginning of Matthew and you read all the way to this point, this is the first time the disciples acknowledge that Jesus is the Son of God. They had followed Jesus. They left their nets. They left their tax booths to follow Jesus. They saw him as a good teacher, but it's only at this moment, after seeing Jesus in this way, that they say, "You are the Son of God." And it's here we get to the main point of the story. The whole scene is helping us to see that Jesus is the Lord of creation, and yet he is present in the life of his people. Theologically, that's the point. What you're supposed to walk away with is Jesus is the Lord of creation. He can command the sea, and the sea listens to him, and yet he cares to be involved in the life of his people. That's what we're supposed to walk away with. And when we understand that, when we start to understand, man, God cares about what's going on in my life, it leads us to a place of worship. My family has experienced this in a really unique way, and I want to share a story with you, but I want to make sure, so just bear with me on this one. I want to make sure that God's the hero in this story and not my family, okay? So as we go into this, just up front, let me say that. And so I want to share a story with you of something that happened in our family on June 27th of this past year, just a couple months ago. 3 years ago, in March of 2019, we went through this financially freed up class with two other couples in the church. At the time, we had $106,000 worth of debt as a family. We had our van and our house. And our van and our house, we owed $106,000 on. And we prayed as a family, and we thought a lot about it, and we decided we wanted to be debt-free by December 31st of 2022. So we set the goal. We're going to be debt-free by December 31st of 2022. We started operating on a very strict budget. We lived on about 30% of our income, very, very strict budget. I picked up a part-time job as a business chaplain, and we had some things that we just were concentrating on as a family to move us into that direction. But then this little thing called COVID hit. And the plan that we had on paper, that we had carefully crafted, it totally went out the window. My wife was intending to return to a more full-time role in the fall of 2020, but we ended up saying, hey, we're going to keep our kids home and do a year of virtual school. And so we did the year of virtual school, and she had almost no income during that time. We just had those, Nikki's dad and grandpa, and both of my grandpas passed away in that period of time. We had lots of unexpected trips back to Indiana, and if you've ever seen the van we drive, it's awesome, it's huge, but it gets really bad gas mileage. And we just had a lot of unexpected expenses along the way, and it was just like storm after storm. And yet along the way, God just kept providing for us in significant ways, unexpected ways. We were very, very faithful. Every dollar we received, we tithed. We're big proponents of a tithe. We give 10% off the top to God, and then the rest we use for whatever we believe he's calling us to. And in this season of our life, we believe that call was predominantly to work on getting out of debt. And on June 27th, 6 months ahead of schedule, we paid our mortgage off. We're completely debt-free as a family. Thank you. Thank you. And I want God to get the credit, but I want to tell you this in the story. We used Guardian Savings Bank right up here on the corner. Some of you may be familiar with Guardian Savings Bank. And when we went on that day to pay off our debt, we took the whole family in, so my wife and I and our 4 kids, and we walked into the bank. And if you've ever been in there, they have a basket full of suckers. And we walked in, and my youngest son, Levi, who's 9, he said, "Hey, Dad, can I have 2 suckers today?" I said, "Take as many as you want. We ain't going to be back in here again." So what are they going to do? Like, what, are they going to follow us out? I mean, come on, let's go. So he got some suckers, and we went out into the parking lot. And maybe you saw this. Maybe you drove by and thought, what's happening over there? But we stood in the parking lot of the bank, and we held hands, the 6 of us as a family, and we praised God for his gracious provisions in our life over the past 3 years. See, steps of faith always result in worship. And when we start to realize that God is very active and very real in our lives, that even when we're going through storms, whether they're physical storms or emotional storms or financial storms, whatever those storms may be, even when we're in the midst of a storm, we say, Jesus is here in the storm. The end result is that we cannot help but to begin to worship. I'm going to share one more story with you and then ask a question. Here's the final story. I was reading in Genesis chapter 24 this week. It's way back in the very beginning of our Bible, the first book of our Bible. Genesis 24 tells the same story 3 times. It's a simple story, a really simple story. It starts with Abraham, and it says Abraham's really old, and his wife Sarah died, and so he sent his servant, to go find a wife for his son Isaac from his hometown, and he says to his servant, go and do this, and if it works out, that's awesome, but if for some reason it doesn't work out, just come back, and we'll see what God does. And the same story is repeated 3 times. That chapter of the Bible is 66 verses long, and it could have been told in about 6 verses. And so I started to think as I read Genesis 24, why in the world would they repeat the same story 3 times in the same chapter of the Bible? And it dawned on me, maybe, just maybe, there's something in there that I'm supposed to see. That like, if God says the same thing 3 different times, maybe there's something in the story that's worth noting. And as I read back through it, what I think is worth noting is the attitude of Abraham and the attitude of the servant. Both of them have the attitude, we're going to take a step of faith. We think this is what God's asking us to do. And we're going to take a step in that direction, and we're going to see what happens. And if it doesn't work out, that's okay. We'll come back, we'll regroup, and we'll take a different step of faith in another direction. And it's in the midst of those steps of faith that God shows up, and in the chapter, he works a miracle. If you read Genesis 24, it's basically the same story of Peter, but about 2,000 years earlier. It's the story of an unnamed servant, you never know the servant's name, who takes steps to follow Jesus, and God shows up in the midst of the steps. And I think it's our story. Whether we're talking about the unnamed servant in Genesis 24, whether we're talking about Peter and his step on the water, whether we're talking about us and our lives, here's the point. Every step we take to become like Jesus requires faith, and it pleases God. Every step we take to become like Jesus requires faith, and it pleases God. It's in our steps that God shows up. And so I want to encourage you this year, take a step. Join us as we serve at one of our 10 ministry events. Take a step of faith and say, I'm going to do it and see what happens. Take a step and go on a mission trip. I know it's a big step, but I promise you, God will show up in the midst of it. Take a step to give generously and to see what that looks like for you and your family. Look at the discipleship pathway. You can go to the next tab of our website anytime and look at it and just ask God, what step do you want me to take to become like Jesus? Because it's in the steps that we see God show up. Here's the question. What step will you take to become like Jesus? What step will you take to become like Jesus? It may be a big step. It may be a promise. It may be a small step. But I promise you, whatever the step is, you will have an opportunity to grow in your faith. If you would, go ahead and stand up with your church family, and you can stand up if you're joining us online as well. This is what I want to do. I'm going to read those statements that we made again, and I just want us to kind of treat this like the 7th inning stretch, okay? You can have a little stretch, and I want you to take a step, just right where you're at. You know, you don't have to actually move, but just move your legs. Discipleship always starts with a step. Peter's step occurred in the midst of the storm. Peter's step led to a miracle. Peter's step shifted his focus to Jesus. Peter's step resulted in worship. What's the step God is calling you to take? Let me pray for us. God, thank you for loving us, and thank you for coming to us in the storm of life. Thank you for being there when we begin to sink and immediately grabbing us when we call out and ask for your hand. Thank you for working in our world. Thank you for Jesus. As our church takes steps this year to become like him, I ask you to help us to shift our focus less on the circumstances of our life, God. I know there's people in this room right now who are in the midst of a storm. They received a cancer diagnosis. They have heard of a family member that has gone awry. There are just so many stories, God, that are present in this room right now. And God, we are in the midst of those storms, and I pray that you would help us to take a step in the storm. God, I confess that I have spent too much of my life sitting in the boat. And I think too many of us have. We're just riding along. We're with you, or we're assuming you're somewhere out there in the darkness, and we're just kind of cruising along and waiting on you to come by. God, would you please move in our hearts so that we take a step towards you. Help us to see you, Jesus, even in the midst of life. Encourages us to walk towards you and arrive at a place of greater worship. God, I know for me and my family, I want more moments like what I experienced in a bank parking lot. I want more times where I'm keenly aware of your presence in my life, and I'm pausing to just thank you and worship you, God. And I pray over the course of this year that would happen more and more, and we pray trusting in the name of Jesus. Amen. I'm going to ask you just to remain standing. We're going to go into a time of communion. This is open for anyone who's following Jesus. If you missed the packets on the way in, they're on the back table. You can grab one. If you're joining us online, you can use bread or crackers, juice or water. What we use isn't as important as what we remember. In communion, we remember that Jesus took a step. Jesus said, I'm willing to take a step. The scripture tells us that while we are still sinners, Christ died for us, that he took the first step, and it's time for us to take some steps as well. So let's eat together and celebrate the love of Jesus and the truth that he comes to us in the storm of life. And let's drink together and celebrate the love of Jesus and the truth that he comes to us in the storm of life. What step will you take to become like Jesus? As you consider that question, I want to remind you next week we're going to start our new series through the book of Revelation. For some of you, your step may be just to come to church for the next few months as we work our way through that book and reveal Jesus in new and different ways in our life. But right now at this time together as brothers and sisters in Christ, we're going to proclaim a song that's really a prayer. And these are the words, Christ be magnified in me. Let's sing that together.
Were creation suddenly articulate with 1,000 tongues to lift one up, then from north to south and east to west we'd hear Christ be magnified. Were the whole earth echoing his eminence, his name would burst from sea and sky, from rivers to the mountain tops, we'd hear Christ be magnified. Oh, Christ be magnified. Let his praise arise. angels' melody. And every human heart is native cry. And in one enraptured hymn of praise, Christ be magnified.
Christ be magnified. Let his praise arise. Christ be magnified in me. Oh, Christ be magnified from the altar of my life. Christ be magnified in me.
Oh, I won't bow to idols. I'll stand strong and worship you. And if it puts me in the fire, I'll rejoice 'cause you're there too. I won't be formed by feelings. I'll hold fast to what is true. If the cross brings transformation, I'll be crucified with you.
'Cause death is just the doorway into resurrection life. If I join you in your sufferings, then I'll join you when you rise. And when you return in glory with all the angels and the saints, my heart will still be singing, my song will be the same. Oh, Christ be magnified. Let his praise arise. Christ be magnified in me. Oh, Christ be magnified from the altar of my life. Christ be magnified in me. Oh, Christ be magnified. Let his praise arise. Christ be magnified in me. Oh, Christ be magnified from the altar of my life. Christ be magnified in me. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. is who you are. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are.
All right, have a seat, guys. There's nothing better than a moving song at the end of a Sunday morning service. Amen. If you heard a little beeping and an alarm, there's I guess some kind of really high-tech drowning alarm thing here. When it detects too much vibration and the water starts moving, it thinks that someone may be drowning. So that was a beeping, if you could hear it. That's because the song was so good. So tone it down a little bit, guys. All right. So glad you're here. We want to welcome the sixth graders. The sixth graders have stepped up into BCSM, so they're here today. Let's go. Speaking of sixth graders, I know it was a little gloomy this morning, but it's football season. And when it's football season, that means it's back to school season. So unless you're a teacher, I hope you're excited about those two things. We have another opportunity for you to serve and give back to your community. Out on the table, there's some tags where you can pick up a tag and you can basically pledge to bring back some school supplies. So we're going to be serving Carson Elementary and Bridgetown Middle School. You can pick up tags for either school or both school if you want. Each tag represents roughly like $10 worth of school supplies of various items. So, we'd love to, as a church, we'd love to be the hands and feet of Jesus and giving back to people that could use help. So consider taking that step. I'm going to do this all week. Kids don't have no idea what I'm doing here. It's just whenever you say step, you should go like this. Okay, giving. We want to thank our church for the amazing giving. Leadership is so thankful for your givingness. Last week, we set a single week record in the church history. We exceeded our previous giving in a single week by more than $5,000. That's how much we exceeded the record. So thank you for giving. You can give in the drop boxes in the back. You can give online through the website. The easiest way is through the app. You can set that up to be recurring if you want. So thank you so much for that. Lastly, if you weren't taking diligent notes, there are a couple other announcements here that are on the seat sheet. So check that out. All right, let's go win the week. Have a great week, everyone. All right.